Hello there and welcome to another BoBeats synthesizer video, and today we are checking out the Roland S1. It's a compact 4-voice digital synthesizer with a sequencer, with an arpeggiator, with reverb, delay, we have chorus, and also a hidden superpower, something that is quite unusual on a small form factor synth like this. So in today's video, I want to focus on how you actually use the Roland S1, what the workflow is like, and give you a very hands-on experience. And a big thank you to Roland, who has kindly sponsored today's video. But first, in order to understand what makes the Roland S1 special compared to the other compacts, we need to do a recap. The Roland Compacts were released in 2021, and the first 3 devices that came out was a vocal processor, a chord synthesizer, and a bass and drum synthesizer. And the J6, the chord synthesizer, did have presets, but you couldn't really tweak them that much on the synth itself, which is a big difference from the new S1, which is a full synthesizer that you can create sounds from scratch on. Out of the 3 previous compacts, my favorite was the vocal processor, and I think that the T8 is fun. It's this kind of drum and bass 303 808 style machine, but you just couldn't do a lot of sound design on it, and that's where the new S1 comes in. So here are some presets and patterns that I created on the S1. And basically you save the presets together with a pattern. So basically you select a pattern and that also contains the preset. And here I've used the arpeggiator to record the arpeggio into the sequencer and then record some parameter automation of the effects. And here's something a little bit more chiptuney with a lot of parameter automation going on. And here's a weird little sequence where I'm using probability per step. So you can set probability per step in the sequence, and I'm also using the sub steps. Let's take a little look here at the workflow, and first up we have to select a pattern because patterns and sounds are saved together. So we press the pattern button and then we have 16 slots here across 4 banks. So it's 64 total patterns and sounds. And the keyboard is, as you can see, I have small hands. It's very tiny. It's quite difficult to play if you have slightly larger hands, but you can of course connect a MIDI keyboard to control it as well. So something that I like to do is just turn on the arpeggiator here. So a lot of commands are hidden beneath shift commands, but it's actually not that bad. It's just 1 layer deep menus, and once you learn them, it's not bad at all. And it has one thing that I really like. I want to see this on all synths. It has a metronome and a count in, and you can also increase the step length to 64 steps. if we don't like the arpeggio that we've recorded into the sequencer, we can hit Shift and just clear note or motion data. So we have two oscillators here. We have a square wave here. And we have this sawtooth. And we also have a sub and noise. And these can all be shaped, so we have some pretty advanced wave shaping functionality here to create new and interesting waveforms out of these ones. So more about that later. So let's tweak the sound some more and see what we can come up with. We have octave range here. And we have the LFO to control the pitch. There's also two rate settings for the LFO, so you can have the faster one going into audio rate territory and you can have the slower one. Over here we have the filter with resonance. And we have LFO control over it. Can even go into audio rate territory. And we have an envelope for the filter as well. But it's basically just the one envelope here, which both controls the amp and the filter if you wanted to. You can also decrease the tempo just using this knob here. And we can introduce some reverb. And it's a quite beautiful sounding reverb and delay. Like Roland really knows their reverbs and delays, and the reverb and delay have their own settings here. So under reverb we have different types. We can set the time, level, we pre-delay, we have low cut, high cut, and also the density. We also have delay settings here for syncing it, for the time, level, low cut, high cut. So there's a lot of ways to shape the sound of the reverb and delay. And there's only the one envelope here, attack, decay, sustain, release. And we can introduce some sub. And we can also now parameter record into the sequencer. It's up to like 8 or so parameters that can be recorded into the sequencer. I'm not entirely sure. And I like to put a bit of LFO to the pitch. Like this is obviously too much, but just a smidge. Like this. Now I just want to see if I can record some more parameter automations just to show you that it's actually quite fun to just kind of mess a pattern up. And first we're going to go into the step mode. So there's pattern that lets you select the pattern, and step loop that lets you loop individual steps while it's playing. Then there's step, and step lets us access the individual steps of the pattern. And if we, let's see here, hold down a step, so like this, D motion flashes. And if we press that, we get access to velocity, we have gate, we have probability, and we also have the substeps. So we can add substeps to a few of the notes here in our little sequence. I have no idea how this is going to sound, but basically this lets us create slightly more intricate sequences. And that's a really hard word to say, intricate, for a Swede. And we can also hold down steps and change the probability. And here is something I don't like about this device. As you can see, when I'm selecting a new step and I press D motion, it doesn't revert back to the previous menu position. This is a big no-no, designers. We need to have menus that revert to, or well, maybe revert is the wrong word. We need to have it so that when you select a new step and press D motion, it goes back to probability again, if that was the page that you were on last. You hear? Let me just fix that up for the other pages, and you can basically, when you're in step mode, just use these buttons here to select different measures. So here's 17 to 32, 33 to 40 to 48, 49, 64, and so on. So something like this. You can also copy steps around, and you can also do some pretty more precise motion sequencing. So you could have like a kick on one step and a snare on another step. Since this device uses automation lanes like in a DAW, it never gets like electron snappy. I think also the Korg Volcas have a little snappier feel to the motion sequencing. So I've found that making like really intricate sequences with changes to the sound per step is, yeah, it's a little complicated. It doesn't work that well. Another thing that I want to show you is the D motion. So we saw this over on the Roland SH4D, and it basically means that you can tilt the device to create changes to the sound. And you have a bunch of different destinations. You can affect pitch, for example, reverb and delay sense, and a bunch of other things. I won't go into all the details here, but you can change parameters, for example, the filter by tilting it. And for a device this size, it works pretty well. So let's see here. Let's hit Shift and D motion destination, and let's select pitch here, and let's change that to, let's see here, let's change it to panning, and let's go to roll here, and let's change that to, let's see here, pitch bend. So now we're affecting the pitch by tilting it, and the panning. I think you can see the appeal. Like, it works really well because this is such a small device and it's also battery powered. On the SH4D, I felt it was a little bit more like gimmicky, but on this one I feel that it could actually work, because this is the sort of like small portable synth that you might actually just be sitting with in your lap and you're playing around with it. I can also see it being used on stage in various, like if you're doing like a small dollar setup gig and you have this and you want to tilt it around for some effects. I think that could be a lot of fun. So in terms of the build, it's the same plastic body as the other Roland Compacts. We have output here, stereo, we have an input that's also stereo, and we have sync in and out. We also have MIDI here on mini jacks, so you need an adapter for that. And we have the volume control, the front panel controls for all the sound designing. We have the sequencer and keyboard control here. And overall, feels decently sturdy, like it's not something that would go around and throwing on the floor, but it also doesn't feel flimsy. It feels pretty good for what you're paying for. The encoders feel very similar to something like on the Korg Volcas. And these keys here, which are actually buttons, they have a rubbery feel to them. They feel pretty nice to play, a lot better than, say, Korg Volca's touch strips. And they're pretty responsive, but as you can see, also very small, so you might want to hook up a MIDI keyboard to control it. Okay, Bo, so what about this hidden synth superpower that you mentioned? What is it? Now, to explain the superpower, I have brought out an oscilloscope. This is the Korg NTS2. So in the oscillator section, we have the square wave. You can see the square being represented here on the oscilloscope. And then we have the sawtooth. And then we have the sub and noise. So we're going to take a look at draw first. So go into the draw menu, go here, press enter, and now we can select different pads here. and change the level. And I think that the technical way to describe it is that we're changing the level of a single cycle in the waveform. So we can just change it around a bit, and then we'll go back to the menu and press enter here, and we turn on either step or sloped. And now, without having touched the filter, our square wave sounds totally different. And if we look at one, you can see it's very different. In the drum menu, we can also change from sloped to stepped. You can see here how it's a more stepped curvature of the waveform. And if we go back to sloped, it's more gentle. But that's not everything we can do. So here we have the saw, you can see here, standard saw sound, and we can go into shop. And now this is a little bit more complicated, I suppose, but you can basically select your waveform of these four ones, the square, the saw, the sub, and the noise, and then you can take out parts of the waveform. So let me see if I can show you this here. So let's go to the saw here, and let's just remove a few of the parts of the waveform and go out and play something. So look at the waveform. You can see how we removed parts of the sawtooth. And we can do the same for the sub, the noise, and the little square wave here. So this means that we can create some pretty complex sounds, such as this, for example. Like, that's pretty beautiful. And once we've chopped up the sound, we can of course also go into draw, and we can change the waveform here for the square wave even more, creating an even complexer sound. And let's set it to sloped. So take a look at this one here. Pretty complex. Let's add in the others. So using draw and chop together, you can create some pretty complex waveforms. Now, before I give you some of my final thoughts on this device, here are some more sound demos. These are presets that you get with the unit. So should you buy the Roland S1? Well, I think that if you're in the market for something that's this small and also portable, it's a really nice just travel synth you can bring up and tweak some sounds, and it's actually more fun than you might think, then yeah, this is actually a really good buy. There are of course Korg Voltgas that you could look at, there are the other compacts that you could look at, but this one has some really interesting features in terms of sound shaping because of the way you can shape the oscillators, and I think that makes it really interesting. And I'm glad that Roland made this one, since one of my main critiques of the original compacts, the J6 and the T8, was kind of the limited sound design potential that those synths had. So I think that they've improved on it with the S1. So let me know in the comments what you think about it, and as always, have a great day and see you in the next video.